firstly, could you tell us about your passion to resolve the climate crisis?
Well, I'm just a human being that wants to breathe fresh air and have clean water. And I just assume that everybody else wants that too. And so I could not just sit back and wait for everyone else to do something. I guess it really started in my childhood. I grew up out in the country, and my mother and father loved nature. And my dad, I remember, collected, he had a whole stack of bird cards. And every spring we would watch the birds, and we'd put the cards out on the windowsill. And I've wondered recently, I wonder how many of those birds we still have. And so I don't know the answer to that, but we read how many species are going extinct because of human activities. So, I mean, there's no way I could just sit back and not do anything.
Yeah, and that was what gave birth to Reboot the Future and the Golden Rule, which we're going to find out about a little bit later. Well, thank you for being here, Kim. And Ssega, you come from Uganda, a country that I know well. I mean, apart from coming from an incredible African country, but where did your passion come from to do the incredible work that you do?
So I think my passion comes from the fact that as an artist, I believe artists are either translators of what's going on at the present time, or also just presenting their view to a larger audience. So for myself, especially now, the climate crisis is the preeminent thing that should be on our consciousness. So I'm very fortunate to be an artist, a musician, someone who has a platform and who has audience listening. So the big challenge is, how do I then, in this day and age, how do I translate that into a message of hope? Because we can have the doom and gloom, but then there is the need to have a hopeful message and sometimes inject some urgency. And being a fan of music, my favorite musicians, Marvin Gaye, all of these different people, they talked about it when there was something big going on, whether it was the Vietnam War with Woodstock, they were talking about it. So now we need to be talking about the climate crisis and using whatever skills we have to address it and to bring people in.
Can I just ask you briefly about your musical journey? Like, just tell me briefly. Just tell me a little bit about what, suddenly I see you, at the Royal Festival Hall in your partnership with Philharmonia. Yeah. I mean, what had you been doing musically before that?
Well, I was a pop musician. Right. So that's the thing, and that's a really great question, because I think some people feel maybe you have to start off in primary school and then you were somebody who's really pushing for environmental things from day one. That's not necessarily the case. I think sometimes we go along. So for myself, I studied engineering actually at university, and then started a band, pop band, Queen Bandit, then actually left to do a PhD in that, and then afterwards you can be a musician. So then I went on tour, and then it took me a little while to get the confidence to then say, actually, let me put in some social messages, let me put in some environmental messages. And then the big turning point was in COVID, when everything shut down, and then we noticed the whole change in our whole environment, and then people started going out and then hearing the birds and everything there. And then I did a commission, which we might see afterwards, Our World Fight for Air, which was my first song and first music production which directly talked to an issue, and that was about the black community around the South Circular and air pollution. And that was the first time. Before, I was just doing different types of pop songs, and that got such an amazing reaction. So I'd love to say to anyone who's creative, really dive in and give it a go, because normally you're scared I might get shot down, but then it's given all these opportunities, which then led to the Royal Festival Hall, which is what you saw.
Yeah, okay, love it, love these journeys, right? Yeah. Amazing, Kim, isn't it? So we have a climate crisis on our hands. What's humanity got to do in order to kind of get through this? And Kim, do you think we're capable of doing that?
Well, one has to be an optimist, right? It's very easy to be a pessimist, but then you just sit back and don't do anything and complain, and that doesn't help. So I try to be an optimist. I was listening earlier to some of the other interviews and speakers that you had on the show today, and everybody had wonderful suggestions, and I agree with everything that they said. For me, it kind of comes down to a super simple principle, which is treat others and the planet as you would wish to be treated. And at Reboot the Future, which is my organization, we really promote that. When in the early days, I had to really brace myself because it's such a simple principle. And I thought, oh, who's going to believe me? But at the same time that I published my first book, Thomas Friedman, who is a very well-known American author and contributor to the New York Times, has been writing many, many books. And he had just published a book talking about the really, really big issues, problems in the world that threaten the world. And after 345 pages, he starts talking about solutions. And he spends 10 pages talking about the golden rule. That's what we call treat others as you would wish to be treated. We've added the planet in it. And then he asks the question, is it naive to think that this will solve the problems? And I love that question because I was preparing my first presentation about our book for Davos, and I thought, they're all going to say this. This is so naive. Who is she? What is she going on about? But he answers it, and he says, we're naive to think that we will survive without it.
We're naive to think that we will survive without the golden rule.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this has carried me through all the years since then, because he's a very powerful voice. And at the time as well, Obama was speaking it quite a few times, and other leaders. It's at the start of the UN Constitution. It is a universal principle that binds us all together. It's the only thing that humanity, all of humanity, could really agree on as foundational. And why? Because it's the core of being human.
Amazing.
And even though we forget about it, we might have learned it, or there's lots of different versions of it, so we may have learned a version of it. There's a lovely one by the Yoruba in Africa, who they say, if you want to prick a bird, prick yourself first and see how it feels. I really like that one. Yeah. There's many different versions, but it is the principle that ties us together.
I'm going to move on and keep it going, but I can't resist, because it was just such a beautiful title about that book with the butterfly. What was that called?
Oh, Imaginal Cells. Visions of Transformation. I can say it in one simple sentence. The imaginal cell is the cell that is innate in the caterpillar, which is for us the old way of doing things, that holds the vision of the butterfly. And it comes out when the caterpillar is decaying and they cluster.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Really, right?
There's a lot more about this story, but I'll leave it at that.
People can get this book. You've got to go to Kim Polman and check it all out on LinkedIn and Google it. But that is beautiful. That book was beautiful. And so, of course, is the Golden Rule and Reboot the Future, Kim. Wonderful. Ssega, tell us, please, the audience, about Pangea and the work you're doing to support overcoming the climate crisis we face. I mean, Pangea, it was wonderful. Tell the audience about it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so this year I've been artist in residence with Philharmonia Orchestra, who one of their residencies is at Royal Festival Hall in South Bank Centre, which is the UK's biggest arts centre. And Reboot the Future then saw that I was going to be artist in residence, had seen some of my previous work, and then they decided, oh, we're going to support this residency. So the challenge, I've talked about air pollution in my area of London, in cities, and how that's something we need to combat in terms of the climate crisis, and especially for black people and black and brown people. But then I thought, okay, let me challenge myself. Philharmonia gave me 12 musicians to work with, which was amazing. So from strings to tuba to harp to timpani. So that was a challenge. And it was going to be in Royal Festival Hall for their finale. So I said, why don't I use art to tackle a bigger issue which is related to climate change? And that's one about global climate refugees and climate migration. Because this is something which is going to happen to all of us. And in fact, in Pangea, the second part, I talked about how we've got climate refugees even in the UK. Where we are now, because when flooding occurs, even in London, you have to move, you become a refugee. When coastal erosion happens, then you have to move, your home is no longer there. So the whole point there is to use Pangea, this was just Act 1, there's a start, to build in some empathy, just to show people, to say, we are all human on this planet. So if someone has to move, so it's not just about, okay, if there's sea level rising in Bangladesh, that could be your neighbor here down the road in Surrey or somewhere else. So it's, if we look at people instead of just statistics, instead of just figures, and say that's a human life, and what's like with the cell, there's so much promise with all the lives there, and to bring it in a different experience, which is the hearts and minds rather than just stats, figures, and reports.
Yeah.
Can you share a few of the words?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Tim, I'm glad I didn't do that. Come on, what a great call.
So, yeah, I've been set up here, but I'm prepared. I'm a performer. So, yeah. This is part of Welcome to Pangea. And again, it's about using, it's the art of music, it's art and creativity to use that to envisage a different future, a different path that we can have. So, welcome to Pangea. I see a cup of tea and coffee at the seaside dock. No sign of immigration post, passport control soon forgot. Where's the division? Where are the slaves? Recent history stop. Ancient wisdom reign.
Oh man!
Wisdom.
And to the audience who don't know, I mean, Ssega is in front of the Philharmonia and on stage, and you've got a beautiful book with you, because you are. How long are you talking for on your own?
So the thing is about 22 minutes with
22
music
minutes.
coming
22
in
minutes.
and out. Yeah.
I mean, amazing. I mean, it was beautiful poetry and like rapping and like, so you were singing as well, weren't you?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Amazing. It was amazing. So can you tell me, at one point, I noticed, because I heard it, was it 1.5 billion people going to be on the move? You just talked about displacement. On the move in 20 years?
In 2050. So currently there are 21.5 million people who are a year annually who are climate refugees. But by the time we get to 2050, it could be 1.2 billion.
1.2 billion people on the move.
Yeah.
By 2050.
Because of climate.
Because of climate.
Okay. So we all realise the significance of that.
And to link to peace one day, because as soon as you get climate and you get scarcity of resources and stuff, then conflict then comes on top of that.
Yeah. No climate action, no peace.
Exactly.
If we're on the move and you don't want to welcome somebody, then of course we know what happens if you don't want to welcome them, right?
Exactly.
So no climate action, no peace. Absolutely. Okay, so what I'd like to know, if people would like to support Kim, Reboot the Future, and don't just give me the website, please, how can people support? What kind of activities can they get involved in, and where do they go?
Well, first of all, we do have the Reboot the Future website, but we also have another one called Global Dimension, which is actually for teachers. So if anyone listening is a teacher, they can go to that website and get all kinds of materials that help teachers talk about the different issues of the world. So that's one thing.
And the website's called?
Global Dimension. Yeah.
.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, Global Dimension.
If they can get to it through Reboot the Future as
Fantastic.
well.
That's
but Global
perfect.
Dimension.
Thank you.
So obviously our social media, follow us on all of our social media. We actually have 2 books, the Imaginal Cell book and with Visions of Transformation, but then the second book is from last year, Values for a Life Economy. And so life economy is represented by the butterfly, actually, and the death economy is represented by the caterpillar. It's the old way of doing things, and we have that extractive, exploitative model, and then the life economy is where all life thrives. So that's the premise of the second book. It's a fuller explanation. We also commission or work with artists, and working with Ssega is the 4th time that we have done it. It started with the Philharmonia, because last year we did a couple of things with them already. They had a whole series of concerts on nature. So we did some pre-concert interviews before those concerts. So they liked working with us, we liked working with them, and that's how we got involved with Ssega. And then we also have conversation cards. One of the things that we do a lot of is encourage people to have very deep and profound conversations about things that they normally don't take time to think about, so that we take the time to reflect really about what it is we're doing. Why are we doing this? Who is it affecting? What really, the question is, who is being affected by what I say and what I do? And is it positive? Am I being helpful? Or am I being hurtful? And that's what we need to ask ourselves every day. And of course, it wouldn't be right if I didn't say the most important thing to do is to live by the golden rule.
Remind us about the golden rule.
Yeah.
What is it again?
Well, our version of it is treat others and the planet as you would wish to be treated.
Great. I'm going to remind my beautiful little girl on Friday about that. Wonderful, Kim. Thank you. Ssega, look, where can people go to hear the music, to learn about Pangea, to see things that you're going to do in the future? Tell us about ways in which we can find out more about you and your art.
I think probably through social media. So all of them are at Love Ssega. So LOVE SSEGA, all one word, on Instagram, on Twitter. And then on my website, lovesega.com. So and then if you fall into that, then hopefully you can then find out what I'm doing. And just more broadly, I'd like to thank Reboot the Future for supporting, and then Philharmonia as well for supporting. So with organizations, if you're involved in the arts, it needs that support. So from Reboot and others. So support artists who can then spread the message further, and we can support the communities and the audiences and everybody else to come in and then spread the message, to learn about whether it's the golden rule and other things.
Wow, awesome.
The arts are such a powerful way to give messages.
Well, I think historically, right, I mean, it's the way, isn't it, Kim? I mean, storytelling, look, I mean, you've talked about a load of books. I've seen them. I've seen your books. They're incredible. And I think, with Ssega's music, and we're going to listen to it in a second, but storytelling, constructive narrative that informs, inspires, and engages people towards impact is fundamentally important to our survival, isn't it? We have got 49 seconds left. So I have to say, Kim, if you had one thing that you could say to a young person who was thinking, I want to make a difference, what should they think about?
Oh gosh, you go first.
49
seconds.
What do you reckon, Ssega? So that
I think go out there and then try and find different communities, so you don't do it by yourself. So look and see their different organizations, or they might be in the arts or anything like that. Find a different community so you don't feel by yourself, because we'll do this all together.
All right, because we feel we don't want to not do it. So get some community around you, get some partners.
Exactly.
I like the idea of being local as well. There's a lot of people talking a lot globally, but the work has to be done locally. And don't get discouraged.
Yeah, never give up.
No, don't give up.
Yeah, it's not about the mistake, it's all about the recovery, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Beautiful.
Together we can do it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I mean, I've just said it all day. It's an absolute honour to be with the most incredible people who are out there trying to save the world. I feel just seriously honoured. Thank you, Kim Polman.
We are
and thank
very
you, Love
honoured.
Ssega.